Today's episode invites a different starting point. Instead of pushing forward, we pause. Instead of self improvement, we explore self relationship. This conversation is about self gratitude, not as a feel good practice, but as a grounded method for nervous system regulation, self attunement, and creating lasting, compassionate change. Welcome back, everyone, to the Mindful Journey podcast. I am Sana, as always, and the start of New Year, it can be a tender time. For some of us, it brings hope and clarity. For others, it brings pressure, comparison, or a sense of feeling behind before the year has even begun. Today, we are exploring self gratitude in a way that goes beyond journaling prompts or positive affirmations. We are looking at it as a practice of noticing, or of staying with ourselves and of slowly rebuilding trust from the inside out. And my guest today is a holistic wellness coach and author whose work is shaped by lived experience, professional training, and years of supporting people through real, complex change. She brings a trauma informed, non prescriptive approach rooted in what actually supports healing and regulation, not just what sounds good. We'll talk about self gratitude as a pathway to self attunement, nervous system regulation, and how it can become a foundation for sustainable lifestyle change, while also questioning where gratitude can feel inaccessible or performative or even unsafe for some people. So, listeners, meet my incredible guest, Kerisma Vere. So, Kerisma, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really honored to have you here.
Thank you so much, Santa. This is I'm honored to be here as well. These conversations are so important for us to be having in our greater society at whole.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I think that's the exact um the vision, the mission, whatever you can call it, but that's exactly the soul of, doing all the work here. And Charisma, when people hear, the term self-gratitude, it's often framed as appreciating your achievements or staying positive. So from your perspective, what exactly what it is self-gratitude is actually about?
Okay, well, one, I just want to denounce the whole staying positive culture because, it's toxic positivity's been shown that this is, but so it's self-gratitude isn't about staying positive at all. It's about meeting ourselves where we're at. It's about being very honest about our internal experience. And for me, self-gratitude is acknowledging where things were difficult, where they required bravery, where they brought joy, where they brought pride, where they brought sadness, frustration, where the critic showed up the most. So it's not about positive at all. It's about this an honest accounting of like what is really going on inside. How do I really feel towards the things like we'll often go to bed at night and we'll go through our day with the threat lens of, like where did my mess up? What did I forget to do? What's
Mm.
looming in my future? And self-gratitude is sort of like a different lens to kind of like look at your day and look at the ways that you showed up for yourself. And it's personal because whereas, you might take certain things for granted because they're very easy for you, those very same things might actually be very difficult for me. But because we live in a culture where, for a society as whole even, that, we tend to keep those things to ourselves, so we're not only not sharing them with other people, but I think we get very disconnected from the truth of that, with ourselves. We're not encouraged to go, "Oh, wow," So, like, for you, taking 5 minutes to yourself today was really, really hard, but if we can start to attune to ourselves and start to practice this new relationship with ourselves, like, "Oh, wow, yeah. That was really hard for me," or "That required bravery for me," or "Wow, I let that go," or maybe I just offered myself some compassion in an area that I didn't do so well. So it's, you know, I don't I sometimes actually kinda laugh because everybody I work with, they have these skills when it comes to their friends and their loved ones, this is how they respond to and treat other people in their lives by and large, but it's not often a lens that we have turned and practiced with ourselves.
Mhm, mhm. And one particular line that I absolutely connected with is, what might be there for you, it might not be there for me. Like this, I shouldn't say privilege, not privilege per se, but this recognition that, myself, I have some things, or I have some um resources, options, or some things in my life which may not be there with you. So at least that recognition itself, it kind of forms the base of empathy. And I think self gratitude, it is less about praise. Once again, more about recognition. It's about acknowledging, in fact, what the nervous system has been managing, even when the outcome doesn't look impressive on the outside.
Yeah, that's so true, and in my own experience with this is how I've built safety with myself, and, you know, I think we all have, as human beings, need to be seen and heard and, validated, and so for our experiences, and that's, by far pretty challenging to actually get it from other people. Some people are good at it, but it tends to be like, not as deep as we're actually able to go with it ourselves. And what you're saying about privilege, that is absolutely true. But it's even beyond privilege because I know that a lot of people who do think themselves lucky, oh, I didn't have a traumatic childhood. Oh, I'm very fortunate in this way. Sometimes that experience alone can prevent a person from actually acknowledging what is difficult for them or what their sensitivities or their struggles are. So it is, our histories, our feelings, our environment, our values, the things we draw meaningful, they all sort of come together to decide what we do in each day, how what that's like, how hard it is, how meaningful it is, what it kind of brings up for us, right? So and then that's sort of like part of the trauma-informed thing is we can't ever assume. Like, if you were to tell me that you had a great upbringing and that you're affluent and all of the rest of it, it still wouldn't be correct for me to assume that you have it easier than me because there's internal conditions that I might not be aware of that might make, certain things, for you a lot more difficult than they are for me. So it's just such a myriad of conditions, right? I think in science they call it the variables. There's so many variables to each person that we can't really be in each other's shoes. Um, and so like then that ability to really see and acknowledge and validate sort of needs to come from us. And then it can be bonus when we get it from other people. But we're the ones that are really going to understand what doing something or not doing something or how we responded to ourselves, where that's hitting home inside.
Exactly, exactly. And that's why, I don't, I don't, I absolutely don't have any, like, I don't agree with generalizing anything. And of course, there is no one size fits all, because that's the beauty of, us humans, that, there are myriads of, it's nuanced, it's complex. So it's never like just one thing same for everyone.
Yeah, and ironically, like the thing we as human beings, I think by and large, most of us are never encouraged to have that really attuned relationship to ourselves. So then we don't actually really know those things about ourselves. So then we go and have relationships. And of course, because we don't really know those things about ourselves, we're not actually able to share or communicate them with other people. And it impacts the quality of our relationships. And it often leaves us with sort of feeling misunderstood or disconnected or disappointed and all of these kinds of things, and that old saying, it took me just it's only been in the last couple of years that I truly understood that saying, like, you have to love yourself before, you can, love anybody else, and it's more like you have to love yourself before you're really gonna feel how much anybody else loves you, right? Because you gotta know yourself, and if you can offer yourself that love, you know what that feels like, and then Yeah, unfortunately can make us a little bit more picky about who we choose to spend our time with.
True. That is 100% true. 100% true, Kerisma. Oh, and you often talk about regulation, as you mentioned about relationships, you often talk about regulation as something relational, not something we force. Uh, so, how does self gratitude support nervous system regulation in a practical, lived way? If you are enjoying the mindful journey, take 2 seconds to follow or subscribe wherever you are listening. It helps the show reach more people who need a softer, steadier space to land. And if he can leave a quick review, it seriously make a difference. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
Okay, well, um, that's we could talk about that for several hours, but sort of in a nutshell, sort of how I see it is when if I'm not aware of what's going on in my internal environment, I don't stand a chance of tending to it. And
Yeah.
so in order for me to be grounded or present or to heal, or any of those kinds of things, like I need to actually tend to what is going on. If I have a part of me inside like screaming or freaking out and I'm not aware of it and I don't tend to it, then I'm not going to be grounded. Or if I'm creating solutions and plans and stuff based on who I used to be or who I want to be, well, they're not accurate, so they're not going to be effective. Any kind of plan I make or needs to actually be meeting the me where I'm at in this moment, and that is my emotional state, my mental state, my physical state, my financial state, my energy capacity, window of tolerance, all those kinds of things. Like if I have a real sense of where I'm at in this moment, then I can make decisions that actually meet 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 that circumstance much better and are gonna be a lot more effective. I'll also say that when we're in fight, fright, flight, freeze, or fawn, when we're in perfectionism or criticism, like intense criticism and guilt and shame and spirals, they add these layers and they require like an energy and they are taking us out of our window of tolerance where we're not capable of making as good as decisions, and they make anything that we're trying to do that much more difficult because they're actually depleting our system, and in some cases, like they're shutting down our digestion and other sorts of things that we might actually need on board for the specific goal. Like for example, sometimes doing an hour on the treadmill causes way more stress to to your body, so you're not actually getting the benefits of it kind of thing. So when adding in those layers, we're stressing out our systems, we're taxing ourselves, we're making things a lot more difficult. When we can ground and center and do things from a calmer kind of place, a more compassionate kind of place, even if it's slower, it actually becomes easier. And because we're, you know, it's like being in a toxic relationship with somebody. You get sick of it and you're out of there. You only put up with it for so long. Some of us it's 20 years, some of it's 20 minutes. But if we're treating ourselves really poorly and being harsh and kind of mean to ourselves, we're gonna rebel, and we're not going to actually be on board with whatever it is that we wanna do. We might do it for a little bit, but eventually we're just gonna, say, "No friggin' way." Whereas when we're in a supportive, encouraging, and nurturing relationship with ourselves, that tenderness, that nurturing, that encouragement, that actually serves as a much, more effective kind of motivation for ourselves, and it makes whatever it is that we're doing, whether it's hard or easy, meaningful or whatever, it doesn't take the struggle away, but it increases our capacity to do it and stick at it, right? Plus, if we've given ourselves permission that like, "Hey, it's okay. I don't have to be perfect. I can take a break." That too becomes more sustainable because it's more realistic. None of us can do anything like 100% of the time, 100% perfectly. We need to if we have a realistic idea of what change and healing and growth looks like, then we're also more likely going to stick at it because we're not gonna get stuck in those, um, failure, guilt, shame loops that can set us back for a long time before we're willing to try again.
Hmm. This stands out. This stands out, Charisma, because um, so many regulation tools, they're often framed as, um, techniques or ways to control the body rather than to relate to it.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and even things like think positively and even affirmations and stuff like that. It was a hard lesson to learn because I've been working on healing my whole life. I had a rather extensive trauma history growing up, so working on healing has been a thing my whole life, and I always thought, like, becoming whole was somehow being able to leave all those wounded parts of me behind, and what I learned was, that becoming whole is actually learning to how to have a different relationship that encompasses all of me, all of my experiences, all of my feelings, all of my beliefs or whatever, and doing so in a way that gives me then gives me choice on, how I wanna do things rather, um from a reflection and a choice place rather than a reactionary place, but that wholeness, it comes from being with, not getting rid of, and so the nervous system strategies that I tend to use, they are more about, like, being able to be here with, and I'm a big advocate for, distress tolerance techniques that you can get out of DBT, CBT can be used very well, and, I'm also a big believer that we need to choose things that work for us and respect what our bodies and stuff are. So I was told to breathe for 20 years. People told me to breathe, but honestly, breathing connected me to my body. That there was so much trauma in my body. It was not a good strategy. I actually needed to do other things. Now breathing works really great for me, but it really didn't. So that's just sort of an example that whatever whatever we're doing, we sorta gotta know why we're doing it and then, make sure that it's a fit for us and not just doing it because that's the prescribed thing. We don't wanna do it just
Mm.
because somebody said to do it.
Yes, yes, yes. Exactly, exactly. That's the essence. That's the essence. And for um someone whose nervous system is chronically activated, anxiety, trauma, burnout, how can self gratitude be practiced, without becoming as another task or demand or just like a checklist?
Uh, Big question. Uh, I think, like in its very basic sense that,
Mhm.
where it started for me and other people is just kinda like noticing. I go, "Oh, yeah, look, I just called myself a name." Or, "Oh, look, I'm being really, really mean to myself about this. Oh," and, like, the first the noticing, and then what happens from the noticing is we develop the capacity for a little bit of a pause, and there's just this this millisecond of a pause where we're pausing with that behavior, and then comes the opportunity for choice. Like, "Okay, maybe I would like to do this differently. Maybe don't wanna respond to myself that way." And it doesn't mean that that instantly changes overnight or that it even ever goes away. It's kind of like, if we've gone to the grocery store using, Maple Street, for 20 years, and then we've decided that we don't like going down Maple Street because there's a lot of traffic, so we're gonna take Elm, we'll always know how to get to the store using Maple Street, and it's gonna take time to learn how to get there and become familiar and comfortable taking Elm Street, and there's probably gonna be days we'll go back and we'll take Maple Street, right? But we in that pause becomes the choice that like, "Oh, maybe I won't go the way I always go. Maybe I'm gonna go this other way and see what that's like," you know? So that's just like a really basic, but, truthfully, the journal I created, it does have, you spoke out against prompts, but it does actually have 8 prompts because what I find is that people who are not used to looking inside and being able to recognize the ways that they showed up for themselves or the things that were difficult for themselves or what's been going on. Those questions that don't naturally just come, right? So you can, I certainly was able to just sit there with a pen at the end of the night and ask myself, okay, well, you know, how did I show up for myself today? What mattered to me today? What was difficult for me today? But I've been writing most of my life, so that but the journal does have those 8 prompts just to sort of like, and they can be bullet point. They just like, and if it fits, if the question brings something to mind, write it down. If it doesn't, move on, right? And it takes like all of 5 minutes, but it starts to rewire your brain to, because that's what we wanna do, whether you do it through like a journal like the one I've created, or you're just sitting down with yourself, or whether you're just pausing a couple of times a day and asking yourself, like, um, where am I at right now? What is going on inside? How am I in this moment? And it's just, you start to familiarize yourself with what is actually going on in your internal world. And then, like I said, you have a choice. You can bring in some different ways of responding to yourself, and it's just all awareness is the birthplace of all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And before we wrap up, I just want to introduce a more challenging angle here. Um, Charisma, because there are moments in people's lives where gratitude, it feels impossible or even invalidating. Like, especially during grief or depression or trauma recovery. How do you work with self gratitude in those contexts without bypassing or discounting the pain?
Oh, thank you, Santa. Absolutely. I wasn't, I know that. I know what it likes to be that very person that you're talking about, and certainly I had a relapse and I was stuck back in my addiction for a while. And even though I was doing like so many wonderful things every day towards healing and recovery, I just couldn't give myself any friggin' credit because I was so hung up in like the guilt and shame spirals about the choice to use. So and that was such a painful place to be, and honestly, it wasn't the place I could get out of myself. I needed help, you can work with a coach or it's usually kind of beyond the role of a friend, but it's a great place to work with a counselor, and peop counselors can mirror, and some coaches like me, we can mirror that compassion, and we can mirror that perspective. So if done properly, I can acknowledge your pain. I can say like, yeah, I know you're really struggling right now. And I know you're seeing everything through this lens of negativity. And I can hear how hard you're being on yourself. And I know that's a really painful place to be with. But, can I tell you what I also see? I can also see that you showed up here today, and that's amazing. You know, um, I can also see that you really care about these things. So by mirroring and sharing my compassionate perspective with somebody, it slowly starts to give them the language and the permission. I think that's a big thing. Many of us don't give ourselves permission to be compassionate towards ourselves. And when you're working with somebody that can mirror that and give that permission, it starts to loosen up kind of those bonds of our upbringing and our internal world that doesn't really allow for that. And that can be done with respect. It doesn't have to be done in lieu of, like, it's not a, like, "Suck it up, you've got nothing," like, "You should just be happy because you've got a roof over your head." It's not like that. It's just like, "I really hear where you're at, I understand how you're feeling, but I also want to offer you this perspective," which is what
Mhm.
we end up doing for ourselves once we're able to.
Yep. Yeah. 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 And I think I gave a very practical example here because I'll be very honest, uh, sometimes, for my loved ones, I've kind of been in that zone when I told them that just appreciate whatever you have. Why are you crying over this, or why are you feeling low? Just appreciate you have a roof over your head, you're getting food, you're alive. So just appreciate whatever you have. But then I felt that maybe it's kind of I'm being like very. dismissive of what they're feeling. I'm not acknowledging what they're feeling, and that's exactly hurting them. That's exactly what is hurting them. Sometimes even I have like conversations with myself or something like this. Uh, So that is a very, very practical example that you shared.
Yeah, it makes me think of when with myself and sometimes other people what the is when if you have children, when they're really little and they go through that phase where they think there's a monster under the bed, right? You know, if you just come in and you say, there isn't a monster under the bed. So, and you turn off the light, you walk away. The kids
Oh,
can,
my good.
yeah, right. They can just sit there in fear, because we know that monster is real for them, right? So yeah, we want to go in and we probably are going to help them look under the bed, or we might get them a nightlight, right? Or we might develop a little routine. So we meet them where they were at, and we help them with whatever it is they're struggling. And that's where the real gratitude comes from. Because if we can acknowledge with your children that you're talking about in that situation, if you can acknowledge the pain and the struggle that they're having, they're naturally just going to open up to that gratitude for all of the other things in their lives. But those struggles, they get in their way of our being able to see it. And when we're told to just be positive or be grateful in that kind of sense, it doesn't do anything. You're right. It absolutely makes us feel unseen and unheard. And what it tends to do is make us move further into ourselves and kind of shut down, which cuts us off from connection and support, which makes it like even that's just a self-fulfilling prophecy that is gonna snowball the wrong direction, right? Whereas if we can learn, like, yeah, like, okay, so, it's really great that I get 3 meals a day, but I happen to hate cream corn, and I'm allowed to hate cream corn without being told there's children starving in Africa. It supports me as a unique individual.
No, no, you're so right, so right, Charisma. And I really appreciate that you brought up this point, because um you know self gratitude, it creates a kind of emotional buffer. Like instead of spiraling into self criticism, there's definitely space to repair, to return, for homecoming. Um, thank you so much, Charisma. And before we wrap up, if listeners they would like to further thoughts after this conversation with you, they would like to reach out to you. How they can do that? So
Sure. Probably the best way is to just go to towardswellness.ca. Or you can Google Kerisma Vere, and there's many ways to interact with me. But my wellness hub has pretty much it has the books, and we're just launching a course right now that's starting February 3rd called From Pressure to Path. That's going to have the self gratitude journal included in it, and yeah, there's always a 30-minute free coaching consultation. And if you reach out to me on social media or elsewhere, I'm always happy to lend an ear or just give a couple of tips or whatever as I'm able to with no pressure to actually kind of work for me. I'm uh, I'm just sort of passionate about us getting these conversations out, and the gratitude we've all been. The gratitude is wonderful and it's powerful. I will not I will not debate that, right? But the concept of what we've been taught about gratitude is sort of systemic of the same problem. It's always be appreciative for everything other than yourself. Have a relationship for everything other than yourself, right? So we need permission to like focus in on ourselves. And yes, like that it's great to be grateful for the roof over my head, but what if I'm really grateful to myself for paying the rent? Whatever it took me to be able to do that, right? You know?
wow, wow, lovely, lovely. Charisma, thank you once again. And listeners, what I'm going to do is have all the links and details mentioned in the show notes so that you can easily connect with Charisma and check out all the resources, the all her courses. And before we conclude, something that I would like to share, what I've realized is self gratitude is not about convincing yourself that everything is fine. It is about staying present with what is, with honesty and care. It is about recognizing the effort it takes to live, to heal and to keep showing up, especially when no one else sees it. So, as we have moved into the new year 2026, maybe the invitation isn't to become someone new, but to relate differently to who you already are. And once again, Charisma, thank you. I cannot thank you enough. This has been such an enriching and practical, grounded conversation.
Well, thank you so much. I love what you just encapsulated, and that is such a great invitation to us all this year. Yes, let's just embrace and embody who we are with more compassion and in love, because the truth is we are all already worthy and deserving just the way we are, and if we can touch into that, then any change we do create can be from a place of choice and joy and not from a place of pressure.
True, true, right. And to all the listeners, thank you to every one of you for tuning into this episode of The Mindful Journey. If this episode resonated, take a moment to notice that. That noticing itself is a form of self gratitude. Until next time, this is The Mindful Journey. Take care of yourselves gently. This is your host, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you.